Okay. It's good to be here again today. We're continuing our study in 2 Samuel. We're looking at chapters 19 through 21 this week. And you remember last week where we ended, Absalom had been killed. David had been told to stay in the city. And he's not in Jerusalem. He's in, and I work on trying to get all these names right. I hope I don't, if I mispronounce one, just move on with it. But Mahanaim is the city that he's in. That's where he went to a city of refuge. And they come back and they tell him that his son Absalom is dead because he told him, whatever you do, don't kill my son. But Joab killed Absalom. And so now we find David at the city gate, not sitting at the gate, but up in the tower above. That's where we left him last week. He was mourning the loss of his son Absalom. And in today's lesson, we're going to observe David's emotional turmoil over this death. And it says, and struggle to know what to do in difficult circumstances. And Israel is torn apart because of what Absalom had done. And so that's why we're looking at David's kingdom being restored. But we're going to begin in chapter 19, verses 1 through 7. And it was told Joab, behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. So the people went and told Joab, as the armies come back, and you remember the runners got there first. And two runners came and told David. And so David's in like I said, upstairs, mourning and crying. And so the army gets back and they go and tell Joab that the king, David, he's crying and mourning for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. So the people that were there in the city and the army that's returning, they come and they hear it. They came back feeling victorious. They were victorious because they stopped the rebellion. And they get back to town, and all they hear is how the king is mourning over what's happened. And they're afraid to say anything because they don't know how the king's not responding in the manner in which they thought he would. David is not acting like they thought he would when the rebellion's been put down. So they're afraid to say anything. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know how he would react. And the people that got by them by stealth that day into the city, as the people being ashamed, steal away when they flee in battle. They returned and they went and hid. They were acting just like somebody that had been defeated. And you're returning home and you don't want to talk about it. You just want to hide for your own life. And that's the way the people are returning. They went out and were victorious. And they're having to come back and act ashamed of what they've done. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son." David that's all he's doing. He's just, that was his son. But it was his son who had been plotting for years to take over the kingdom. It was his son who tried to kill him. It was his son that had caused all this. And that's all he's doing. And Joab came into the house to the king and said, "Thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life and the lives of thy sons and thy daughters and the lives of thy wives and the lives of thy concubines." Joab goes into the house and he tells David, "Look, you shamed all of your servants. You shamed the entire army. You're bringing shame on this entire army. This army that saved your life and your sons' lives and your wives' lives and everybody's life. These people put their life on the line and they saved all this for you. And yet, this is how you're acting. In that thou lovest thine enemies and hatest thy friends." Because of the way you're acting towards these people that did all this for you, this makes it look like you loved your enemies more than your friends. This makes it look like you loved Absalom more than you loved the people that saved you. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all we had died this day, then it would please thee well. He's telling them just straight up. This is the leader of his army. who's also his nephew. And he's lived his whole life serving David. Sometimes real well, sometimes not so well, but he's lived his whole life for David. And he's done whatever David asked him to do. That's who David asked to send Uriah to the wall so he would die. And Joab did that without question. And that's what he's come to him now. And he said, after all this, after all that's been done for you, by all of us, it makes it as though you'd rather we be dead and Absalom be alive. That's how you're making me feel. That's how you're making everybody feel. Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak comfortably unto thy servants. For I swear by the Lord, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one with thee this night, and that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befell thee from thy youth until now. And here's where he tells him, get up and get outside. And if you don't, then everybody that's been serving you is going to leave you tonight. It'll be over today. Anything in everything that you've hoped for, everything that you plan for, your kingship, everything will be gone tonight. If you don't get up and stop this and get outside and thank the people. And if you don't, you just think things have been bad up until now. Everything from your youth up until now is going to be nothing compared to what's going to happen to you. You just can't imagine what's going to happen. And as he says here in our text, he said, David was the king of Israel and he had a job to do. Even in sorrow, he must fulfill his responsibilities to his people and to the Lord. Here we see the powerful influence leaders have. People look to leaders to know what to think, how to feel, and what to do. Leaders set the mood of the people they lead, and David's sorrow cast a dark shadow over the people and confused them. This tells us that godly leadership is a must. We need leaders who will seek God and lead people in the way of his righteousness. Pray that God will send us such leaders. We also see the crippling effects of sorrow. It is not wrong to sorrow, especially when we lose someone in death. Yet we cannot allow the sorrow to overwhelm and paralyze us. We should not sorrow as those without hope. Life goes on, and we must continue to take care of our responsibilities to the Lord, our family, and our jobs. The first thing is David should have been acting like a leader and showing the people that he's thankful for what's happened. But all he was thinking about was himself. He was not thinking about other people. And then he was simply thinking about himself and the sorrow. And it's not to sound cruel or ugly, but there is a time to mourn. But that's not the end. If you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, and you lose someone, and you've done what God has asked you to do throughout your life, maybe they led you to Christ, maybe you led them to Christ, maybe you both were led to Christ at the same time, whatever. But if they know Jesus as their Savior, yes, there's a time to mourn and a time to be reflectful, reflect on the lives and reflect on things. But you can't go sit in the corner and just pull a cover over your head and be done with it. If you're a leader, there's people that that you're responsible for. And we're talking about leaders. We're not talking about just the President of the United States or the governor of our state or the mayor of our town. We're talking about each and every one of us. Each and every one of us are a leader in some respect, in some aspect of our lives. It might be a leader to your children. It might be a leader of the church. It might be a leader in your community. It might be a leader to that lost person that's looking to you and trying to figure out how it is that you respond to the same situation differently than they do. That you respond to it with hope. Because if we know Jesus Christ, we have hope. And that hope is not, as we generally think of hope, that hope is that we know we will one day be in his presence for eternity. And all this mess in this world will be over and done and behind us. But that's what we're not seeing from David. He needs to get up and get out and move on. It's not forgetting about their lives when we say we have to get up and move on and take care of our responsibilities. We're not going to forget them, but life goes on. And the world keeps turning. The world keeps moving. And God's got things for us to do between now and the time that He returns. And we can keep those people's memories in our minds, and they can continue to influence us. Just because they're gone, they're not going to be forgotten. So we can honor them, not by sitting in a corner and, like I said, pulling a cover over your head and waiting for the end to come, but we can honor them by using what they taught us and using the influences that they made on us and sharing those with other people. I mean, we got a grandchild coming in July. And one of the things that I can't wait to share with them is my dad. Because we lost him almost a year ago. And they won't ever know him. And I won't mourn and sit and pout because he's gone. But I feel every day influences that he had on my life. Both of my grandfathers. I can't wait to tell them about both of my grandfathers and what they did for me and in my life to get me where I am today, good or bad. I mean, and my grandmothers, the same thing. I've talked about Nanny Spencer, Etta Mae, and the influence that she had on someone. But that's how we're supposed to act about people that we lose, not sit and cry and just think that the world is over. It moves on. And one day, because of the hope we have, we'll all get to be together again and talk about, you know what, I couldn't wait to tell so-and-so about what you did, about this story, and now you can tell it to them yourself. I've got stories of my grandmother that I will share, and in fact, I've shown you that she wrote all kinds of things down back in the 60s. She wrote stories down about all of her kids and about her walk with God and about her prayer life and how it was answered. And we found this when my dad passed away. We were going through the attic looking for stuff and looking for old photos, and I found this. My mom had it, and it's written in my grandmother Spencer's name. And I took that and I had copies made and bound to give to all my cousins and my aunts and to give everybody in the family. And it's turned into friends that knew that. And I can't wait to share those stories with those that never knew her. And one day, like I said, she'll get to tell them those stories firsthand. Maybe I got a little something wrong here that she'll straighten me out and say, well, this is how it really happened. But that's great. That's what we have to look forward to. Then the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told unto all the people, saying, behold, the king doth sit at the gate. And all the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. David went and sat at the gate. Remember, the sitting at the gate was where the business was conducted. That's how Absalom captured the hearts of Israel, because he sat at the gate and said, you know, if you had a leader, he'd be taking care of this for you. I wish I could take care of it for you. And that's how he got to be, that's how he wiggled his way in, and that's how he overthrew David. And so now David is at the gate being a leader and doing what he's supposed to do. And the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. So the people came out and came to David because they were scared. They had all gone home, got in a tent. They all went and hid. And all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us out of the hand of our enemies, and he delivered us out of the hand of the Philistines, and now he is fled out of the land for Absalom. So the problem we have here is David had left Jerusalem, and he crossed the Jordan. He was over on the east side of the Jordan, and the 10 tribes of Israel that were on the other side of the river, those 10 tribes, it's still turmoil over there because they're the ones that had accepted Absalom as their king. And now they're saying that the king that had saved us out of the hands of our enemies and delivered us out of the hands of the Philistines, David, who had saved us and done all these things for us, he's fled the land. He fled because of Absalom. It says there remained a great confusion in Israel over who was to be king in Israel. Some were doubting David's ability. He had defeated the Philistines, but he ran off, like it says here, when his son came after him. And he bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word unto the king, return thou and all thy servants. He won over, it says, and he bowed the heart, he won over the hearts of all the people of Israel. And how did he do that? By sitting at the gate and conducting business the way a king should. Acting like a king instead of mourning. Acting like a king. I guess you could say all he had to do is look and see what Absalom had done. It worked for him, so he can work for David again. By sitting at the gate and doing his job. And so he won over the hearts of all the people. So the king returned and came to Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to conduct the king over the Jordan. He's heading back home. He's heading back to Jerusalem. It says here, too, that in reminding everybody, he told Judah that he was one of them, that he was a part of them. And it says here, of all the tribes, they should have been the first to welcome David back. He also made a compromise with him by appointing Amasa, who had led Absalom's army, to lead the entire army of Israel. So this is also a part of how, sorry I got ahead there, but this is also a part of how he won over the hearts of Israel. He reminded that tribe that he was, the tribe of Judah, that he was a part of them, but then he made a compromise. And Amasa had led Absalom's army. And so David said, I'll make him the head of my army. So there's a couple of things here. It asks, was that a wise move? So you stop and think, Amasa was also one of David's nephews. He was a cousin to Joab. And it looks to some of them as though there's a reward here for revolting against the king. But David's also thinking that Joab killed my son. He's still got that in the back of his mind. Joab killed Absalom, even when I told him not to. You remember, he was helpless. He was stuck in the tree. He was defenseless. And Joab just walked right up and killed him, taking matters into his own hand. Taking matters into his own hand, getting David up and getting him out of the house. And so David goes and makes Amasa king of his army to pacify and to try to solidify all of the people of Israel. And so then they head back, they're heading back towards Jerusalem. And they came to help David and his entourage get across the river Jordan. And the king said unto Barzillai, come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said unto the king, How long have I to live that I should go up to the king into Jerusalem? Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I may die in mine own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and of my mother. But behold, thy servant Simham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do with him what shall seem good unto thee. So David's headed back to the Jordan. They're about to go there and cross, and these different people come down and meet him. One of them was Shimei. He's the guy that's a descendant of Saul that had cursed David on David's escape from Absalom. And then there was Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's crippled son, who David was a little aggravated with because he didn't go with him into exile and then to fight Absalom. And Ziba is the one who was Mephibosheth's servant, you may say. He's the one that had gone to David and lied to David and told him that Mephibosheth didn't want to come. And so David gave Ziba everything that Mephibosheth had. And so now, here we have Mephibosheth talking to David and telling him, David kind of scolded him at first, but he's telling him, I would have been there, but Ziba wouldn't bring me a mule, a colt. I couldn't get loaded up myself, and he wouldn't do it. He just ran off without me and lied to you. And so David said, well, he was still a little unsure. So David said, well, I'll tell you what, I gave everything you had to Ziba. I'll give you half of it back. And Mephibosheth's answer to that, to prove his loyalty to David, was just let him keep it all. I'm just happy you're alive. That's showing David that Mephibosheth did honor him and was a supporter of his and did stand behind him. And then Barzillai, this was a guy, it says here that it says David welcomed to join him in Jerusalem to care for him the rest of his life, because Barzillai is the one that supported David and his men when they were escaping. He's the one that provided food for them and shelter for them when they were escaping from Absalom, while they were waiting to gather themselves up and to get reinforcements in order to attack Absalom. And so David was hoping to reward him for all that. And Shimham is probably Barzillai's son. And that's what Barzillai said, look, I'm too old. I'm too old to be able to hear the music in the king's palace. I'm too old to be able to tell what's good food and what's not good food. I'm too old to care about any of the entertainment you got going on. I'm just an old man. I just want to go home. But if you want to take Shimham with you and do what you will with him, and as I said, it was most likely his son that he offered up. And so David took him. And it says here, David faced difficult and serious decisions in returning to the throne of Israel. He chose to replace Joab with Amasa as his chief commander. He took from Mephibosheth, his loyal friend, and gave to Ziba, who had deceived him. He let Shimei live when he had cursed the king. There was still division in Israel and the threat of rebellion. Leaders are faced with difficult decisions. What should David have done? It's as important, it says here, it's important. In all that we've looked at and all that we've read here, never once did David go to God and ask, what should I do? He did that early in his life. And then he strayed away from that. And he found the problems that he brought upon himself with Bathsheba, because he wasn't consulting God in how he should conduct himself. And then after Nathan the prophet showed him the error of his ways, he got himself back on track. And then he strayed again from serving the God. And he started serving himself. And he's found himself in trouble again. And he's going through all these, he's trying to do right. But the first step in trying to do right is to go to God and ask, how do I do right? What should I do? And he's not. It says this does not bode well for David and Israel. It is of paramount importance for us to seek the Lord in every decision we make, no matter how large or how small. And that's not hard to do. Every time we've got a decision, when we make a lot of decisions every day, well, we can start our day out by asking God to direct us on everything that we do today. Show me your will as I go through things today, and he will. He'll do that. But if we begin our day and just head out willy-nilly and thinking for ourselves, it turns sour pretty quick. And there happened to be there a man of Belial. You remember that word from back several weeks ago? A man of Belial, a woman of Belial. That means a wicked or worthless person. So there happened to be a wicked and worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjaminite. And he blew a trumpet and said, we have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel. This is what David crossed the Jordan with all of his people. And all of the people from every tribe came down to welcome David back into Israel. and to escort him back to Jerusalem. People from every tribe. And as happens a lot of times when we're not putting God's will first and thinking about others second and ourselves third, they started bickering and they got into arguments because David had set that kind of an example for them. David had not been setting the example of what's God's will. That's what we're going to do. What do others need? That's what we're going to do next. And so all the tribes, they started arguing with each other. And to the point where it says, so every man of Israel went up from after David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri. Not everyone, but what it's saying here is this guy stood up, blew his horn, and said, look, I'm not supporting David. I'm not going to stand for this. And who's with me? That's what he's saying. And a lot of them were. A lot of the people from various tribes packed up with him and they left. And it said, but the men of Judah clave unto their king from Jordan even to Jerusalem. So the men of Judah and some others, they continued to escort David to Jerusalem. And so they get to Jerusalem, and it's not in the verses, but it's in between this and where we're going to go next. But David had replaced Joab. Amasa, this Sheba, he had run off. So all they got on their minds is, here comes another rebellion. This is going to be the same song, different verse, the same thing that happened with Absalom. This guy's gone. So David says to Amasa, who he's appointed his general and the head of his army, I need you to gather up the army and go after him. I need you to take care of this. And so 3 days later, he still hadn't done anything. And so he was replaced with Abishai. That's who David selected to be the head of his army. Well, Abishai is Joab's brother, a cousin to Amasa. This is all in the family. This is all tight-knit stuff. and probably all kinds of petty jealousy in there. So he replaces him with Abishai. And he raises the army. And he heads out to the city where Sheba had fled to. And they're there. The army's there. Abishai's there. Joab, his brother, who used to be the head of the army, is there. And they look up, and here comes Amasa. He's coming to join them. And this Joab, because he's been able to do whatever he wants to do. He's talked to the king however he wanted to talk to the king. He's done whatever he wanted to do. He killed the king's son because that's what he thought best, even though the king had told him something different. Joab's got good days and Joab's got bad days. David's got good days and David has bad days. But because David's the leader and he set the tone, you get people like Joab. And so Joab's real clever. Amasa comes walking up. Joab acts like he dropped his sword. The leader of the army, the man who's killed untold people, just happens to drop his sword. He dropped his sword. He bends down to pick it up. He's got it in his hand. And before he puts it back in the sheath, no big deal. Nobody's alarmed because he just dropped his sword. He's just picking it back up. He walks up to Amasa and like he's going to give him a hug and a kiss of greeting like they do. And he grabbed him by his beard and pulled him in close and stabbed him with his sword. Just ripped his belly open right there and left him lay on the road. And it even says that he didn't have to strike him a second time because that was a deadly blow. And he was probably writhing around in pain. And it was such a gory mess that the army was stunned. And the people wouldn't walk down the road and wouldn't walk by him until they removed his body and put him out in the bushes. And then the army headed out after Sheba. But not with Abishai as their leader, as David has appointed. he acquiesced to his brother Joab. So Joab's leading the army. And they come to that city. The matter is not so, but a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba the son of Bichri by name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. They besieged this city that Sheba had fled to. This is a city that was known to have wise people within it. And they besieged the city, and they came to Joab and said, why are you doing this to us? And that's what he explained. That this man, he lifted his hand up against the king. Deliver him, you give us him, and we'll leave you alone. And the woman said unto Joab, behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall. Okay, we can settle this real quick. And then the woman went unto all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. And he blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, every man to his tent, and Joab returned to Jerusalem unto the king. So that was that. It says here that Joab is an enigma. In one sense, he was a man of action when King David struggled to know how to act. Joab saved David a lot of trouble by taking matters into his own hands. However, Joab's tactics were less than admirable. Whether Joab was acting according to the will of God is unknown, because there is no effort to seek God's will. This was another failure on David's part. In closing here, he says there is nothing easy about decision making, yet we have to do it every day. Sometimes we make the right decisions, and sometimes we do not. But if we would seek the Lord's will in every decision we make, we would make better decisions. We cannot see the future outcomes of our decisions, and there are many unknowns to us. But God sees all, and there is nothing unknown to him. This is why we must seek the Lord's will in the decisions that we make. David too often made the mistake of inaction. Leaders cannot stand on the sidelines and let others make decisions for them. Leaders must act. Leaders must decide. As I often define leadership, it is the person who goes first. To be a strong and godly leader, we must seek the Lord's will in decisions that must be made. And once clear on what to do, we must have the courage to step forward, leading others into the will of God. A couple of things there that we've all heard. You can't lead someone someplace you haven't been. So you can't be a leader of people, as I said, in whatever aspect, if you haven't been there or are willing to go there yourself. That's what a leader means. Like he said, it's the first person. You have a leader in kindergarten class. That's the person that gets up there and tells about the weather, or takes them to the lunchroom or whatever. But you've got a leader that's the first in line. And being a leader is not something that you just sit back and point and tell people what to do and where to go. You have to be a part of it. And you're leading a group, you're leading a team, and you have to know too that everybody that's a part of it is just as important as the other. And to know that your team or your group or whatever is only as strong as the weakest member. So you've got someone that's struggling, you got someone that doesn't know. You don't turn on them and attack them. You lift them up. And everybody works with them to get them to the same level as everyone else. Whether it's a sport that you're playing, whether it's at work, whether it's your job. I mean, we have 170 people where I work in that building. And it's our desire to take care of people and to live up to their expectations of what they came for. But we're only going to be as good as the weakest person there. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, whether they knew or didn't know, for whatever reason, if somebody fails, we all fail. And that's the way it is with David here. He's not being the example. And because he's not turning to God. which that's what we're learning here. That's all we have to do is to turn to God and ask. That's what we're supposed to do. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what our decisions are going to lead to. But God does. God knows everything. And He knows everything that's going to be the result of anything that we do. And all we simply have to do is trust in Him to know that He's going to take us where we need to be. With that, I'd like for us to go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning so thankful for your word, so thankful that you share with us all these endeavors in David's lives, all these activities, everything that's in the Bible that you've shared with us so that we can learn from it. That's the reason it's there, that you want us to not make the same mistakes. We're all so thankful, Lord, to know that all we simply have to do is seek you, to ask for your guidance, for your direction, and to know that you know where it's going to lead us, and you're going to lead us to where you want us to be. That you are the leader that we should pattern our lives after. Your Son, Jesus Christ, and the example that He placed before each and every one of us that we saw. All we simply have to do is to be like Him to the best of our abilities. I just pray, Lord, that you bless each and every one here today, that you'll continue to bless our services this morning, and to help us to apply what you've shared with us to our lives each and every day. I ask forgiveness of my sins in your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.